Diago Chakarja agus Fólse to Solas Nua's CIFF at Home with NYC DC Dialogues. My name is Maeve McCullough. I'm the new director of the Capital Irish Film Festival, and I'm delighted to be here with you this evening. Tonight, we have a pre-recorded questions and answers interview with director Anna Rodgers, discussing the 2020 documentary, When Women Won. Anna is a multi-award winning director and producer, best known for her documentary films. Over the course of a 20-year career, she has told stories of identity, sexuality, disability, and marginalization. She won the Best Director for Somebody to Love at the IFTAs in 2014, and her work has garnered her multiple nominations, 3 RIAC Awards, and numerous Best Documentary Awards. Before we begin tonight's presentation, I'd just like to highlight some of the upcoming Solas Nua programming. We have The Lighthouse Keeper's Son by Hannah Khalil. That play reading takes place on December 2nd. On December 7th, we have a poetry reading with Jessica Traynor and Victoria Kenefick. And Is It About a Bicycle returns on December 11th with Sinead Gleeson. CIFF at Home will return in January with School Life, an hilariously funny and poignant observational documentary following 2 prep school teachers, John and Amanda Layden, on the brink of retirement. The film is by Sultru Films, and we will be presenting their latest documentary, Young Plato, in the next edition of the Capital Irish Film Festival in March. We'll put links in the chats for these events and more. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to the team here for organizing everything today. Enjoy. Hi, Anna. Thank you.
Hi, Maeve.
Thanks so much for joining us here today, and with all our CIFF at Home viewers here in the States and in Ireland, actually. So When Women Won is such an extraordinary film. It's been so wonderful to actually just watch it again. And I suppose my first question, the thing I kept thinking of as I was watching the film was, how do you make a film about a campaign that essentially has been, 30 years in the making, and about something that is so complex and runs across decades with so many different people. So I was curious as to how, first of all, how you came to make the film, and then what your approach was to actually getting the work done.
Yeah, it's very complex to condense something like that into 50 minutes. And originally, actually, the film was supposed to be just something 20 minutes long to put on the web. And really, when I started looking at it, then I came back to the team and said, look, I really think we should do something longer, because there's so much amazing archive there, and it's such a big story as well. But I had known Alva Smith for years. I'd worked on the Gays LGBT Film Festival, and myself and Alva had been on panels or met each other, and we kind of knew each other a bit socially. And so she originally was the one who introduced me to the Together for Yes team. And we came into the office and we met at kind of a circle of many of the people that you actually see in the film in the end, just to kind of go over their memories of what had happened. Because of course, when people come to you to make films about this sort of situation, they come to you after the fact. Like, it's very rare that somebody gives you a call. I wish they did more and say, come and follow us. But people are so nervous to allow cameras in to follow them through things like that. And obviously it's always better if you can be there when things are unfolding. But when there's a lot of things going on like that, and the priority isn't to making a film about this historical thing, the priority for them was the campaign. They wanted to do something for posterity to record the story. So that's how it began. Myself and Zlata Filipovic came in, and we just asked everyone to tell us their memories, like kind of key moments that stood out to each of them. And I wasn't actually interested in what their memories were at all, which they didn't realize, but I was sneakily kind of writing down who was a good talker on this or that topic to try and get a sense of who was who, and who was a very kind of evocative storyteller who could kind of bring you back to the past. But yeah, how do you do it? It's a lot of archive research, and trying to condense it down is really editors are gods in those situations.
So you actually worked with the original team that you'd worked with on the marriage equality film that you made a few years beforehand. Was it the whole same team that was working on this film?
In different guises. So we had made a film called The Story of Yes, again, after the referendum. So built from archive, but in that situation, we had loads of our own archive because we had been working on the campaign ourselves in different ways. We'd made kind of marriage equality videos for Belong To, and we'd made things for gays. We'd made films about kissing in public. So we had lots of footage.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so we're just really lucky. And also on the day of the referendum of the marriage equality one, on instinct, myself and Zlata Filipovic said to Gaze Film Festival, look, we should go and film this just to make a little video, a viral video. We didn't know it was going to turn into a documentary as well. But if you have footage like that, it's really great. In the case of When Women Won, we didn't have anything. So that was...
Yeah, I was going to ask you at that. I was so surprised when I heard you say that in another interview, and I was really shocked because the way the film rolls, it feels as though you were there the whole way through. It's like on the shoulder filming. So how did you manage to put all that footage together?
Yeah, so I mean, you know, we do something which is the same when I worked with Hugh, my brother, on The Story of Yes. So Hugh directed that one, I directed this one. We all switch around a bit.
Yeah.
And so like we do this thing where we kind of call it performed reality, or you know, I suppose like it's recreation in a way, but we don't do it in a... People feel really awkward when you ask them to put on the same clothes from that day, or to you know, head out to vote, but they're really only just kind of walking on the street. But we do reenact things in a way that's very subtle, and a lot of times people think it's real, like when they're watching it back, because we juxtapose that stuff, that recreation footage, with real footage that we do have. So if you film somebody like Alva Smith putting on her pink leather jacket and getting ready to leave her house and going out, and then you cut to some archive that news cameras have picked up of her coming along in the same outfit, it feels much more real. But I suppose it's a little bit of trickery. You know, it's very important to do it very ethically and carefully in a film that's about something historical. But if you don't do things like that, it's very hard to bring a story to life. You know, you've got interviews, which are your basic building blocks of telling the story. And it's really important to get really long, great interviews with people. Like I interviewed each of them for probably like 2-3 hours. They were exhausted, and so was I by the end of it. But then you have your bed, you know, you have your bed of the story, but then how do you capture things? And some of the most, you know, emotional moments are ones where cameras are never there. Like, you know, people don't film at those times. The only way to do it then is to get into, I suppose, something poetic or something creative to try and bring that story to life and bring people back there, you know, just get people to kind of put themselves back in that time, which is very different to the observational doc, which is the following people around when it's unfolding and actually happening, you know, which I love.
Well, it was so effective because I was so surprised when I realized that. But you must have, in the time that you spent with all of the interviewees, and especially the 3 leaders of the 3 different organizations, you must have gotten to know them quite well, because there's a lovely sense of ease that they all have on camera. And I know obviously they do a lot of public media, but in terms of telling the story, it feels very authentic. It doesn't feel staged.
Yeah, I suppose, well, definitely I had a rapport already with Alva because we knew each other a bit. And because Alva had seen my previous work, there was like an immediate trust there. So, you know, we didn't have to kind of warm up too much. Orla O'Connor and Grania Griffin didn't really know us very well. We had a few meetings and we talked things through, but I suppose the way we film is very much, you know, putting people at ease, you know. Like I heard an appalling story the other day about somebody who went in to make a TV program, and they were sitting there on their phone the whole time, and then kind of, you know, cameras ready to go, and they just sat down to do the interview. And you're expecting someone to pour their heart out to you, like having made no engagement with them. So we don't do that. We, you know, we'll be chatting to people about where did they get their lovely blouse, or, you know, what are they going to do after this, or what are they doing at the weekend, or, you know, get to know them a little bit, tell them about ourselves, like, and make it a very human experience, which sounds so basic. It's like basic human communication skills, but a lot
2022 or 2020 at the time,
just have to warm up a little bit, because no matter
Yeah,
who you are, people are nervous going on camera, and especially when there's a lot of pressure on it. Like,
yeah,
all of them would have done lots of media, but they're not the kind of people who love being on camera at the same time. You can see that they're
yeah.
very ordinary as well. Like, they're not kind of YouTubers, so you've got to put them at ease. And that's why having a really long interview with somebody really helps, because you can kind of go right back to their own childhood, being a young girl growing up in Ireland, their own memories of what was the first thing you heard on TV, or what was sex education like for you in school, or when did you first hear that word abortion? So that kind of helps you kind of go along a journey with them. So by the time you're getting to the kind of heart of the story, that they're already kind of chatting and they're comfortable.
Yeah. Well, it was amazing. I mean, in terms of how the story rolled out, to give the context going all the way back to 1983 to the X case, the way you moved it across all of the milestones of the different campaigns, and then how the three organizations came together. I thought what was extraordinary too was using the organizers as well to tell the stories, and that you were so sensitive to individuals' personal stories, especially about their experiences of their own challenges of having to actually leave the country to go and get an abortion outside of Ireland, especially families who had, where they had the fatal fetal syndrome. Can you talk a little bit more about how you weave those stories into the filmmaking? Because obviously you had to be very, very sensitive to everybody involved.
Yeah, that was particularly difficult, because I suppose the thing is, all of these kind of huge changes in Ireland come about from people telling their personal stories.
Yeah.
So like last week, we had an extraordinary documentary on Radio 1 about Blackrock College and sexual abuse by the church. Some young men or some men came forward and told their stories. And it is those kind of things that change things. But it's very difficult for the people who have to be the ones to kind of break the silence and come forward. And you're asking people to kind of put themselves out there who really don't want to do it, but they have a kind of a desire to change things for the greater good. But there is like collateral damage in that as well. Like it can be deeply traumatic for people, and especially when you're putting people out, onto the media, and you can't really guarantee how they're going to be received, how they might be treated, all of that kind of thing. So, I mean, in the case of TFMR, which was the organization of parents where they had a fatal fetal anomaly and had to travel, we used archive footage there. So again, we didn't put them through telling their stories again. And that was like a very deliberate decision, that we didn't want people to have to come and rehash things that they'd previously done. But we did take the footage and put it in monitors of cameras and made it feel like we were there. So again, a little bit of, but we did track down everybody who was featured. And in the case of, say, Amy Walsh, I would have gone out to her house and sat down with her and shown her the footage. So a lot of documentary makers, and I understand it, like it's risky, don't show things to people before it's broadcast. I can't always do it because I might be working for another production company, not my own, and the producer might not allow me to, or RT might not allow me to show it to people. But when you're making something about a sensitive topic, I always try to convince everybody on the team that it's going to be okay if we show it to them, because if people have reservations, you're better to know that than after it's been on TV. And so, we did talk to them about it. And there were a few people who absolutely did not want to be in the documentary. They didn't want to go there again. Or maybe some of them were, I suppose, really still affected by how difficult it was. And I suppose we are so grateful to all those people who came forward and told their stories. It was the same with marriage equality. There's a lot of people who went around and literally went door to door, like begging for, the right to get married, which, asking people, will you vote so I can have the same right that you have? And it's so hard to do that. And of course, to receive sometimes negative feedback on the doors. And people went out night after night, day after day, and did that.
That was so compelling, that part of the documentary where you saw the door. I think there was the turning point of when the posters went up when you did your launch, when the campaigners did their launch, and then everybody realized, oh, we've got to move forward quickly with this. But then as the the smaller campaign started to roll out within the larger campaign, humanizing the experiences of all the women, I thought that was so powerful. And then to see people going around door to door, it really was a county by county national campaign. And that was really unprecedented in terms of the extent of it, right?
Yeah, like, because I think, these things are always won on the ground, they're kind of, it's through the grassroots networking. And like before Together for Yes, obviously, there was a huge amount of groups all around the country already formed in rural places that had been doing work, whether for the abortion rights campaign or for other organizations. And so there was a network of people out there who were motivated. And it was just kind of mobilizing everyone to work under this one organization. But can you imagine like what that all took? Because it was such a short period, really, that and when you think about rural Ireland as well, like nobody really knew what way the vote was going to go. Like, the fact that it was like 66.4%, was a shock, I think, for a lot of people. Like I remember, really the night before and not knowing which way it was going to go. And honestly, it was the same for marriage equality as well, because when you live in Dublin, you can be very cut off from rural Ireland and from the islands,
absolutely,
from west of Ireland, and think sometimes, I suppose, that people might be more conservative or still be religious and that kind of thing. So I think we were really surprised. And maybe, I don't know, does that sound really bad to say that? But like, it's just admitting, I suppose, when you live in a urban place, that you don't really understand rural life as much,
And there's there's so many stereotypes about, rural Ireland and divide and things. But, I think there's always forms of resistance. I was actually just watching it with another piece by Sinead O'Shea on doctors in a town in Ireland who basically were helping young girls, literally take them from the homes and help them, basically allow them to have their pregnancy at their private home, to sort of help them so they wouldn't have to go to those homes. So I think we underestimate the power of people everywhere, not just necessarily urbanly as opposed to rural. But absolutely. I think one of the things I really felt throughout the whole film as well was, and this is obviously coming through the campaign too, was the level of the tone of the campaign, the level of respect, the sensitivity to everybody's opinion. You could really tell that the organizers were really trying to relate to people on a human level. And this was about really telling stories about what was happening to people on the ground. But the part that really I felt sort of broke a glass ceiling was the campaign for fathers and brothers and men, to get them involved in terms of making sure that they were going to vote in the campaign. Can you talk a little bit about that and that part of the documentary?
Yeah, I loved getting that footage. Again, like, all this stuff was made up of things that had happened. So we knew when we blocked out the kind of campaign story, once we got past the history part, which was the most complex thing to deal with, to try and condense that, we looked at like what were the most interesting parts of the campaign from a human perspective. That was one that really stood out to us. Like we'd seen some of the videos and ads that they'd had go out at the time, and had seen like the reaction that, the online kind of engagement with them and how mobilizing they were. So that was something we just knew we really wanted to capture. And I think Sarah, Clark and Linda are brilliant in that section, because they kind of bring it all to life, like that idea, that men felt it was a women's issue and they wanted to break those things down, so I think that was was strategically very effective. So again, it's like, that storytelling thing of just looking at like the skeleton of the story and just figuring out where all of the key points were, and then when you find that lovely footage, so much of when you make a film like this is made up of other people's work as well. Like we've so many people to be grateful to for that. Like, there's this woman, Paula Geraghty, who you always saw like at campaigns out there filming on her camera, and she had a load of footage of campaign marches and things like that. And sometimes that footage just goes onto a shelf on a hard drive and nobody ever sees it again. Or in the case of some of that campaign around the mobilizing men, it had been made by, I think it was Rothko. It's like a big ad organization, who then allowed us to use it. So yeah, it's just kind of getting to repurpose that footage and tell a story through it, which and always, like, I suppose for me as filmmaker, you're always trying to get people to feel the feelings that people felt at the time as well. But I know you put the tone there, like that was a really specific thing that was communicated to us, was there was to be no mudslinging in the film, because there was no mudslinging from their side. They felt during their campaign that it was always kind of respectful, and they held a certain kind of tone that I suppose appealed to a large amount of people. For some people, maybe they found it hard because it made things a little bit more moderate in a way. And then other people maybe were used to, like, campaigns for rights like that being louder and being a bit more, having a bit more friction, but appealing to the masses, trying to get a big majority like that. And so we tried to capture that tone of how that campaign was run in the film as well. So, like, I suppose, you're being careful about how you represent the other side then in it as well. There was lots of footage that we could have put in, but we didn't, from that point of view.
Yeah, I thought it was very fair in that sense. And also I was at the beginning, just to hear Alva talk about, what they wanted to achieve in terms of the depth and sincerity and the commitment and solidarity together, that, they wanted this to be rigorous and also, balanced, but reflective of what was happening. And at the end of the day, with the statistics for abortion in Ireland, everybody is affected by this. Everybody knows somebody who's had an abortion or has had to travel to England. So it's not that it's that, outward reaching. It's actually something within people's lives already. So I also thought bringing that campaign and documenting that was so important, because so often men are never part of any of these conversations when, they're part of the originating issue that we're talking about. So I thought that was very unusual, and it was just great to have that centered in the film. I've seen a number of your other films, and your work is really phenomenal. And I suppose I'm curious about how you got into this work. You've really chosen to focus the crux of your work on issues of social justice. And when you look at many of the issues that you've tackled already, it's really a profound body of work. Do you mind telling us a little bit how you started out and really what inspired you to do this work?
I started working, like, really, I'd made a couple of documentaries myself, but I started working in the early days as a researcher for Alan Gilson, who I worked with for many years. And he taught me a lot. He was very generous during that time, sharing kind of, tips and things like that. And the first project we did together was in St. Isha's Psychiatric Hospital in Portrane. And I actually lived very near the hospital. And when I was growing up, like, it was always a threat, like, if you were naughty in Portrane.
Terrible,
a terrible kind of, it was shrouded in a lot of kind of myth and stigma, in my area. And going in there, had a huge impact on me. I remember the first day I walked in, and I was afraid because I was carrying all this baggage, and I remember, it's this extraordinary old building, and I went down one of these very, very long corridors, and I could hear somebody screaming and roaring, which sounded totally terrifying, like something from a horror movie. But instead of freaking out and leaving, I walked towards the sound. And when I got to this kind of atrium in the middle of all these corridors, there was a young man there who actually was more frightened of me when he came across me. And I realized afterwards, when I found out a little bit about him, that he was deaf, and he was shouting because he could feel the reverberation. And for me, it was a real kind of turning point of just realizing that you're probably wrong about your fears, that if you actually kind of get to know a little bit more about it, that, I suppose things are much clearer and much more understandable. So kind of set me on a course working with him. We did a series in a hospice as well about death and dying. And I would have worked really closely with all the participants from that TV series. And we followed them right up until when they died. So you're getting to know, like, their families, their children, and then they all one by one passed away. And that was also an extraordinary kind of experience. So after that, I suppose it kind of set me on a course in a way, and I started making my own work then. And the first kind of big series where we took on LGBT rights was with my sister-in-law, Aoife Kelleher, and I. made a series together called Growing Up Gay. And
Which is
that was,
amazing, yeah.
it was great. I actually just was with one of the kids who's now an
Oh,
adult.
wow.
Q&A for our newest film. He hosted the Q&A because he's like really successful now.
Oh, that's amazing.
And yeah, like that was a great series, and I think really had an effect on people. It was 2009 when it was broadcast. It's the first young people, the youngest people to ever come out on Irish television as trans, bisexual, gay, lesbian. And I have like no doubt that those kind of things, you know, chipped away at some of the ideas people had around the country and contributed, you know, those young people contributed to people voting yes all those years later, you know. And they were amazing. Like one of them was only 14 when they
so
came
courageous
forward. Yeah, absolutely. And for their families as well, to take that leap, you know, and say, look, like, let's do this, even though they were getting bullied in school, and there was a lot of things going on for them, that they said, like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be the one. And there was only a tiny number. If we went to make it now, sure, we'd have probably 100 applications, but everyone who came forward and said they wanted to take part were in the series, because there weren't that many people who were willing to do it, you know.
That's extraordinary. And also I think many people don't realize when you think of Ireland, think of what has happened in the course of 35 years and how much has changed and how much we've changed. And so even though last week, you know, I was talking to somebody about, you know, the Black Rock College story, and they were so sort of shocked that these stories are still coming out. And the truth of it is there's so much collective intergenerational trauma in our country, and you know, there's still a lot of work to be done around that, and telling stories is part of that. So having documentaries like the ones that you make are extraordinary. And I did get a chance to look at your new film. You have a new film that just opened in London the other night. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, so it really does feel like it's part of the same lineage, you know, that same track that we've been on for so many years. So our new film's called How to Tell a Secret, and it's many members of the same original team. So Zlata Filipovic is again producing. My brother Hugh Rodgers did the musical score along with Michael Fleming, and Paul Mullen did the editing. We've worked together previously as well. So I went along to see a play about HIV disclosure, which is Rapids by Sean Dunn, and I loved it. It blew me away, and I realized, like that, I didn't really know anything about HIV. I had ideas about it that I had to confront and realize, oh, you know, God, I didn't think I you know, held any kind of stigma or bias or whatever. But when I was at the play, I kind of realized that, you know, I really don't know anything about women who have HIV, for example, because you don't encounter that very often in the media. And so we went for a coffee, myself and Sean, and we decided to translate the play into it's kind of an unusual film. It's like a hybrid of documentary, theatre and drama. And it's opening in cinemas on World AIDS Day on December 1st. So we're really excited. There's a lot going on this week.
It's astonishing. Yeah, you have so much going on. Well, I think we have to wrap it up, but I just want to say thank you so much, Anna, for being here today, but also for your work. You're holding a mirror up to Ireland and our society, and showing us who we really are. And it's really, really important, because I think we all have these historical ideas about identity, and we are a very, very rapidly changing country. I heard a statistic actually from one of our board members, Colleen Parsons, recently, that 20% of our population in Ireland were not born in Ireland. So we need new ways of looking at ourselves and seeing ourselves for who we are. So When Women Won was absolutely phenomenal, and I hope more people continue to see it. And it's been such an honor to screen it here as part of CIFF at Home. So thank you so much.
Thanks a million for showing it, and lovely to talk to you today. Thanks.
Hope to see you again. Take care. Bye.